Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Enormous global demand is building for copper, platinum, and zinc, driven by new technology, mitigation of health risks in hospitals, and agricultural augmentation. Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Hi, Sashnee.
Robert Friedland recently highlighted that copper is increasingly being used in hospitals and wind energy. Can you tell us about that?
You know, Robert Friedland always makes a very dramatic presentation at the mining indabas. He's a person who presents extremely well. He uses a lot of, the video material, a lot of backing, photographic backing, and he brings in various other voices during his speech, and he makes a mark. Even when he came to Joburg and spoke on platinum, he gives so much detail. Some people sort of are critical of the amount of detail that he gives, but I think it's very, very valuable because he's not only a miner, he is really a marketer, and he looks at those markets with such detail, which I think if the others are looking at them with that detail, I plead with them to also communicate that, because we often don't get that insight into where future markets are that we do get with Robert Friedland. I believe he's also into Hollywood. He will be making films on metals and minerals that come out of Hollywood. So he's determined to really do a massive marketing job, and his narrative is extremely interesting. And among the issues that he raised there was that the hospital use of copper should really be mandatory. He spoke of the US military making sure that door handles and bed rails and everything else you get in a hospital is copper coated, because he's saying with the super bug at the moment, people are dying in hospital. They're going in for hip operations, and he came up with some hair-raising things about how they're having to have legs removed because of the bacteria getting into the body. And he's saying the world hasn't really produced a meaningful antibiotics for the last 35 years, and the only way to really stop this superbug from winning in these hospitals is to use a lot more copper. That's the passive way you fight this, he says, because actively he urged people not to go into hospitals, saying, rather let the doctor come to you. And I have personal experience of this. People that have worked for me, going into hospital, the operation is successful, but being killed by superbugs in South Africa. So it's resonating around the world that they should do something in these hospitals, and he's saying they should cover everything with copper, because this is the passive way to fight the superbugs and this bacteria that antibiotics can now just not deal with. But then on the copper front, he presented a huge demand building up because of the volume of copper that's required for renewable energy, for instance, particularly wind energy, and the amount of more copper you use now per unit of electricity than you would use with coal-fired power station that we used to. So that was a big eye-opener. And then also, with the fuel cell, we look at the hydrogen fuel cell, which uses platinum, but competing with that is the Tesla vehicle, and he's saying that there's a lot of copper in that. Okay, these two types of energy for car movement are competing with one another, but he's saying there are different applications for them, because he's saying that Tesla is more for smaller vehicles when you're going to, as he said, going to collect some eggs down at the cafe, and you don't have to drive too far, your range isn't too far, a small vehicle, and that's going to use a lot of copper. But then, he drew attention to the other metals that he mines. Of course, he focuses in on the metals that he mines. He's not quite mining them yet, but that he's discovered, in large quantities, and his discovery leads to development, because he starts developing mines. So if you look in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Central Africa, he's working on copper prospects and also zinc prospects. If you come down to Africa, in South Africa, he's working on platinum.
Now, he sees platinum as holding the key to hydrogen's potential. How so?
I spoke to a lot of people about hydrogen's potential when I was down at the Indaba in Cape Town, and I spoke to some leading academics And it was a real eye-opener what's happening in Europe, because both the Europeans and the Japanese have decided that the future way of powering your car and also powering your homes is through the use of the fuel cell, platinum using fuel cell that it relies on hydrogen. And many of the people that I spoke to, put out chapter and verse of how this quick recharging infrastructure is just rolling out in Europe, rolling out also in Japan, and California seems to be a place that's also going for it. And they're saying that the Tesla, which has got a lot of publicity, will have a role in the smaller, but it's just not going to be there for the bigger car, for the SUV, for buses, and they talk about trams and trains being driven by fuel cells using hydrogen, and how well this hydrogen goes down, because when you don't need to actually have a battery to store the electricity when things are hot or cold or the wind isn't blowing or anything like that. You just store the hydrogen, and then when you need it, you can get it through, and all the safety issues around that hydrogen seem to have been dealt with. I was really convinced after listening to some of these top people that are doing studies on it that what Friedland says is correct, and he's saying that big demand for platinum is on the way, because it'll be hydrogen fuel cells which are platinum catalyzed that drive your car, and it'll also be, he didn't speak too much about the stationary side of it. The stationary side of it is smaller, but it can also be a power station in your home. You get the gas, you drive it with that gas, and you don't have to really rely on a big utility, because you can have your own setup in your home, or you can have it in a complex of homes, or whatever you like. And that is happening in millions of instances in Japan already.
Now, zinc is also being added to soil to grow food. Can you tell us about that?
Like you think of zinc, it's galvanizing. We think of it for galvanizing steel, and then Robert Friedland will just enlighten you on the importance of zinc for fertilizing soil, and how good this is for the market, because you put this into the soil, you get wonderful growth, it's healthier food coming through. But from a metals producer point of view, there isn't even a recycling possibility. With a lot of these metals today, you've got to be very aware that there's urban mining, because you're pulling it out the ground at great cost. You're putting it into the market. When a vehicle, say, is scrapped, in the case of platinum, you can take out the catalytic converter, and you can get that platinum, very quickly from a scrapping of the vehicle, and platinum isn't consumed, so you can use that again. Now, in the case of the zinc, there's also recycling. If you can cut down on that recycling, it really boosts mining, because it means you haven't got this competitive metal coming in all the time to compete with what you're doing, and often doing it cheaper. So if they build up, they can push your price down. So again, he drew attention to the fact that zinc has got this very interesting use in agriculture.
Now, Friedland also had concerns about urbanization and pollution.
Yes, he speaks very stridently about, what these particles, tiny particles that are emitted from vehicles and that are generated within urban areas, due to people's health. He spoke about, if you live closer to the freeway, there's chances of greater illness, dementia, Alzheimer's, people getting cancer. He didn't pull his punches on that. People could say he's talking his own book, but he's coming out. He comes from a medical family background, so he really pushes these things very, very hard. And he's saying it's extremely dangerous, and that the world should recognize this. That when you urbanize, and there's so much urbanization, he talks in mining terms. Just urbanization builds up. We talk of 20 years build up. He showed you pictures, of Beijing 20 years ago and that same part of Beijing today, and it's just so built up. But he's saying this is like reflective of what's happening around the world. Urbanization is just the momentum is so huge, it's moving forward. And then he's saying you've got these sort of issues of pollution, air pollution. He picked on air pollution heavily because of his platinum, background, and the fact that you can do things with your vehicles using the fuel cell. He's saying they should, because you want to clear this air. We're in an atmosphere now where we want to clean the planet. Let's clean it. We've got the means to do it, and it's going to, it'll help us in South Africa, because as he was saying, all that platinum that you see around the place that the German car manufacturers are putting in, and the Japanese are putting into their cars, comes from South Africa. Some of it from Southern Africa through Zimbabwe, but most of it South Africa. And I think that's something that should be alerting us to the fact that we need to really also play a role in encouraging the world to clean up the air, because he's saying it's so dangerous, these small particles. And again, he illustrates to you, just how tiny they are. And they're getting into your lungs, they're getting into your bloodstream, they're getting into all parts of the body and causing grief. And so here we have the means. There is a World Health Organization. We should all be appealing to them, lobbying to them. Miners should be sending, delegations to say we must clean up the air. And all the emission you get from a fuel cell is water. So this is really made for the world as we see it, with climate change, trying to mitigate against that. But as he's saying, climate change, the time frame is long. This pollution is now. So do it now. And either through the catalytic converter, where you're using the platinum, or better still, through the fuel cell. Of course, that uses a lot of platinum at the moment. A lot of the people producing parts are saying they want to try and thrift that, because platinum is expensive. But that takes a bit of time. You first got to get vehicles into the market and stationary products into the market. But that will probably also happen, that it'll be a win-win, that they'll end up using less platinum, and from a South African point of view, maybe less per car, but more volume. And that will be a huge benefit to us here in South Africa.
Thanks for speaking with us, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Sashnee.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.